Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
Imagine, if you will, the oppressive, yellow-hued twilight of a St. Petersburg summer. Not the kind that invites languid strolls, but one that presses down, thick and suffocating, like a shroud woven from dust, destitution, and the acrid tang of human despair. It clings to the very air, this melancholy, and, more disturbingly, it infiltrates the minds of men, whispering insidious suggestions in the quiet desperation of their hearts. And into this oppressive atmosphere, we cast our gaze upon a young man. He is not a villain, not by any conventional measure. In fact, there are flashes of remarkable intellect in his eyes, a sensitivity in his features that hint at a profound capacity for compassion. He is a scholar, adrift from his studies, plagued by poverty so abject it feels less like a condition, and more like a predatory beast gnawing at his very bones. His name, for now, we shall hold back, but his torment is our immediate focus, for it is here, in the crucible of his suffering, that the most terrifying questions are forged. Can a good person do a terrible thing? It's a question that echoes down the grand, echoing corridors of moral philosophy, yet here, in a dingy rented room that smells of stagnation and forgotten dreams, it takes on a chilling, visceral immediacy. Our young man, brilliant yet broken, has begun to toy with an idea. Not a casual fancy, mind you, but a meticulously constructed edifice of logic, built block by painstaking block to justify the unthinkable. He paces, he broods, he stares out at the grimy courtyard below, where the sun struggles to pierce the gloom. His mind, once a haven for academic pursuits, has become a battlefield. On one side, the nagging whispers of his conscience, the ingrained lessons of right and wrong, the simple, undeniable human repugnance for violence. On the other, a formidable army of rationalizations, spearheaded by a single, seductive concept: the extraordinary man. He believes, you see, that history is moved forward not by the meek, but by those rare individuals, the extraordinary men, who dare to transgress societal norms, to step over conventional morality, if it means advancing humanity, if it means clearing away obstacles that impede progress. And what, he wonders, is a greater obstacle than a petty, grasping old pawnbroker, a louse, who preys on the desperate, hoarding her ill-gotten gains while others starve? A woman whose life, by any objective measure, seems to diminish rather than contribute to the common good. It's a chilling argument, isn't it? To weigh a human life on the scales of utility, to declare one person's existence a net negative and therefore expendable. Yet observe him. His hands clench and unclench. A tremor runs through his frame. This isn't the cold calculation of a sociopath. This is the agonizing struggle of a man who senses the precipice, who feels the icy breath of the abyss, even as his intellect constructs a bridge of lies to cross it. He doesn't wish to be a monster. No. He convinces himself that this act, this single terrible transgression, would not be for personal gain alone, though the money, he admits, would alleviate his and his family's crushing poverty. No, it would be a statement, a daring act of social surgery. He would be a benefactor, albeit one stained with blood. He would be freeing himself, yes, but also, in a grander, more abstract sense, freeing others from the tyranny of such vermin. He walks the streets, his eyes burning with an almost feverish intensity. He overhears conversations in taverns, stories of the pawnbroker's cruelty, her vast wealth, her utterly useless existence. Each tale, each passing comment, is seized upon by his tormented mind as further evidence, further justification. The world, it seems, is conspiring to validate his monstrous theory. But then a flicker, a moment of clarity, a child's cry, a kind word from a stranger, the simple beauty of a sunset reflecting off a canal. These moments prick the balloon of his intellectual arrogance. A wave of nausea washes over him, a profound self-disgust. How could he, a man who dreams of noble deeds, who possesses a genuine, if buried, capacity for empathy, even conceive of such barbarity? And yet, the idea, like a persistent fever, returns. It coils in his gut, a venomous snake, whispering that this is the only way out. That suffering has warped him, honed him into an instrument of justice, however brutal. That to not act would be a greater failing, a surrender to the very inertia he despises. He is trapped not just by poverty, but by the relentless logic of his own twisted genius. This, then, is our hook, not the crime itself, but the harrowing journey towards it. The agonizing dance between a good heart and a terrible idea. The insidious power of justification. For it is in this terrible gestation, in this internal war, that we truly begin to understand the horrifying fragility of human morality, and how easily a desperate soul, under the right confluence of circumstances and intellect, can convince itself that a monstrous act is not merely permissible, but necessary. And as he descends deeper into this labyrinth of thought, the air grows heavier, the shadows lengthen, and we, the observers, are left to wonder, is escape even possible once such a seed has taken root? Imagine, if you will, a single, solitary decision, conceived in the quiet desperation of a cramped room, nurtured by the relentless gnawing of poverty and intellectual arrogance. A thought whispered at first, then shouted in the echoing chambers of a tormented mind, claiming the power to redraw the very lines of morality. It's a decision that, once made, once acted upon, doesn't merely alter a life, but shatters it, sending fragments of a soul scattering across the cold, indifferent cobblestones of St. Petersburg. This is where we begin, not with a crime, but with the chilling prelude to one, and the enduring, agonizing aftermath that truly defines Fyodor Dostoevsky's monumental Crime and Punishment. For many, the title itself promises a straightforward narrative, a transgression, followed by its just retribution. A simple equation. Yet, to approach this masterpiece with such an expectation is to mistake a vast, tumultuous ocean for a shallow puddle. Dostoevsky, that unparalleled cartographer of the human soul, is not merely interested in the legalities of an act, nor even its immediate physical consequences. No, his gaze penetrates far deeper, past the superficiality of police reports and courtroom dramas, into the churning maelstrom of guilt, isolation, and the desperate, often unwitting, search for redemption that follows. Our protagonist, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, is not simply a murderer. He is a young man, brilliant yet impoverished, brimming with the volatile cocktail of idealism and nihilism that coursed through the intellectual veins of 19th-century Russia. He is the architect of a theory, a chillingly rational justification that certain extraordinary men are not bound by the moral laws that constrain the ordinary masses. These select few, he posits, have the right, even the duty, to transgress, to shed blood, if it serves a greater, world-improving purpose, to remove an insignificant, harmful pawn for the good of humanity. A terrifyingly seductive idea, isn't it? The notion that some lives are worth less, that the end justifies the most heinous means. It's a whisper that has echoed through history, from the grand pronouncements of dictators to the quiet rationalizations in our own private moments of despair or ambition. But Dostoevsky doesn't simply present this theory. He plunges us headfirst into its living, breathing consequences. The crime itself, the brutal axe murder of an old pawnbroker and her innocent sister, is but the first stone cast into the pond. The ripples, however, extend infinitely, touching every aspect of Raskolnikov's existence. The true horror, the true punishment, is not meted out by the state, at least not initially. It is a slow, agonizing immolation from within. It is the fever that racks his body, the paranoia that grips his mind, the profound, unshakable alienation that severs him from every human connection he holds dear. How does one live with a secret that black, a deed that heinous? How does one reconcile the soaring intellectual pride that conceived it with the festering moral decay it leaves in its wake? This is where the beyond the crime truly unfolds. We witness the agonizing psychology of a man haunted not by specters, but by his own conscience, by the inescapable reality of what he has done. Every glance becomes an accusation, every conversation a potential trap. The very air he breathes seems to choke him. He wanders the squalid streets of St. Petersburg, a ghost among the living, his brilliant mind now a cage of torment, dissecting every motive, every consequence, every minute detail of his act in a relentless, self-flagellating loop. Dostoevsky's genius lies in his ability to make us complicit in this internal drama. He doesn't merely describe Raskolnikov's suffering. He makes us feel it, makes us question our own capacity for judgment, for forgiveness, for understanding the darkest corners of human motivation. He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, the fragile line between genius and madness, the corrosive power of ideology untethered from empathy, the profound human need for connection and redemption, even for those who seem most lost. And then there are the characters who orbit Raskolnikov, each a prism refracting different facets of society and morality. The compassionate Sonya Marmiladova, whose own suffering and unwavering faith offer a counterpoint to Raskolnikov's intellectual pride. The cunning Porfiry Petrovich, the examining magistrate, whose psychological cat and mouse game with Raskolnikov is a masterclass in intellectual sparring. The noble Razumikin, the pragmatic Dunya. Each character serves not just as plot device, but as a moral compass, a mirror, or a stark contrast to Raskolnikov's fractured world. They illuminate the spectrum of human response to poverty, injustice, and moral transgression. Crime and Punishment, therefore, is far more than a murder mystery or a psychological thriller. It is a profound exploration of free will versus determinism, of the limits of human reason, of the inherent spiritual nature of humanity, and the desperate yearning for meaning in a world seemingly devoid of it. It asks us to consider what truly constitutes punishment. Is it the cell, the lash, the gallows? Or is it the self-inflicted torment of a soul severed from grace, the unbearable burden of carrying a monstrous secret, the profound loneliness born of one's own hubris? As we delve into these pages, we are invited not just to observe Raskolnikov's descent and potential ascent, but to journey within ourselves, to question our own moral boundaries, to examine the seeds of justification that might, in moments of desperation, take root in our own minds. Dostoevsky holds up a mirror, not to judge us, but to reveal the complex, contradictory, and eternally struggling nature of the human spirit. The crime is merely the entrance fee. The true price, the true experience, lies in the harrowing, beautiful, and ultimately redemptive journey beyond it. Welcome to the world of crime and punishment, where the real drama unfolds not in the courts, but in the depths of the human heart. Chapter 1. The Extraordinary Man Theory. The air in Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov's cramped garret room hangs thick and stale, a physical manifestation of his own stagnating thoughts. Dust motes dance in the sliver of weak, yellow light filtering through the grimy window pane, illuminating a scene of abject poverty. A tattered overcoat lies discarded on the floor. Alone, bent spoon rests beside a chipped, empty teacup. Rodion himself is stretched out on a narrow horsehair sofa, not truly resting, but rather wrestling with a monstrous idea that has taken root in his feverish mind. Ah, dear listener, come closer if you dare. Step into this claustrophobic space, where the very silence hums with the intensity of an unfolding tragedy. Here sits a young man, Rodion Romanovich, intelligent, even brilliant, yet consumed by a pride so immense it chafes against the chains of his destitution. He is no common idler, no, he is a man burdened by a theory, a terrifying philosophical construct that has begun to justify the unthinkable. For weeks, he has felt the tendrils of a hideous dream, as he calls it, tightening around his soul, promising a release from his squalor, a proof of his own exceptionalism. He rises, his movements jerky, driven by an invisible tormentor. His clothes are threadbare, but he dresses with a peculiar dignity, a ritualistic precision that belies the desperate act he is about to undertake. Today is not about securing a meager loan. It is about reconnaissance, a final rehearsal for a performance he prays will redeem him. His destination, the gloomy apartment of Alina Ivanovna, the old pawnbroker, the human insect, the source of his torment, and, perhaps, his salvation. He steps out into the sweltering heat of Petersburg, the city itself a symphony of human suffering, drunken cries, the stench of decay, the endless, milling crowds of ordinary folk. He walks amidst them, but he does not truly see them. In his mind, he is an island separate, superior. He despises their mediocrity, their blind acceptance of their lot, their endless capacity for submission. And in this contempt, his theory finds its cruel justification. His previous visit to the pawnbroker, under the guise of pawning his last silver watch, was in truth a meticulous mapping of her lair. He had studied the layout of the apartment, the position of the heavy chest, the hanging keys, the worn stairs. He had endured her sharp, suspicious gaze, her miserly calculations, her endless, whining complaints about her difficult sister Lizaveta. And with each minute spent in that suffocating atmosphere, his conviction had deepened. Alina Ivanovna was not a human being. She was a principle, an obstacle, a pestilence upon the earth. 100,000 good deeds could be done with the money of that stupid, spiteful, ailing old woman. He mutters to himself as he navigates the crowded streets, oblivious to the jostle of passers-by. His internal voice is a furious whisper. 100,000 lives set straight. Think of it. And if her death could achieve that, if one paltry life could be sacrificed for the benefit of so many, why, then, would it not be a just act? A righteous act? Would not the scales of justice demand it? Here, dear reader, is the insidious birth of his extraordinary man theory, not yet fully articulated, but deeply, venomously felt. He believes that humanity is divided. The ordinary men, the vast majority, who live by conventional laws, passively accept their fate, and exist merely to propagate their kind, and the extraordinary men, the true visionaries, the leaders who possess the intellect and the courage to transcend these laws, to shed blood if necessary, for the greater good of humanity. He sees himself, in his feverish imaginings, as one of these extraordinary men. A man destined not merely for personal gain, but for an act of cosmic significance. A Napoleon, yes, but one who would wield his power to alleviate suffering, to rewrite the rules for a better world. He returns to his room, his mind a tempest, agitated and exhausted, yet filled with a terrifying icy clarity. And then, as if by fate's cruel design, it arrives the letter from his mother. The familiar, delicate script, once a comfort, now a harbinger of despair. He tears it open, his heart pounding a frantic drum against his ribs. His voice, once an internal monologue, now feels a tangible presence in the room, laden with the weight of revelation and despair, a voice speaking to us directly, intimately. "Oh, Danya, my sister, my darling sister! What have they done to you?" The words from the letter leap out, searing his vision, painting a grim picture of their desperate poverty, of his mother's frantic hopes, and of his sister Dunya's horrifying sacrifice. She is to marry Fyodor Petrovich Luzhin, a man he has never met, yet whose character is drawn in crude, indelible strokes, calculating, pompous, a man who openly seeks a penniless but beautiful and intelligent wife, so she might forever be indebted to him, a grateful, subservient slave. He boasts about saving you from ruin, from disgrace. Raskolnikov seethes, clutching the letter, his knuckles white against the crumpled page. He buys your virtue, your youth, your spirit, for the price of bread and shelter. And you, my sweet, noble sister, you agree to this humiliation, this spiritual prostitution, for my sake, for my supposed future, to lift me from this wretchedness. The letter details Luzhin's impending visit to Petersburg, his expectation that Raskolnikov would leave his mother and sister for the sake of appearances. The sheer arrogance, the cold-blooded manipulation. It is a declaration of war on everything Raskolnikov holds dear, a sickening confirmation of the world's grotesque injustice. "No, no, I tell you," he shouts, though no one hears, save the indifferent walls and us, his silent confidantes. "This cannot stand. This sacrifice, this monstrous bargain, it is worse than murder. It is a slow, agonizing death of the soul." And suddenly, the theory that had been a nebulous intellectual exercise, a dark fantasy, crystallizes into a horrifying, urgent reality. If ordinary morality dictates that Dunya must suffer such degradation, that his mother must grovel, that he himself must remain in this suffocating poverty, then ordinary morality must be broken. He, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, the extraordinary man, has found his purpose, his justification. He will not stand by and watch his family devoured by the world's indifference, by the ordinary men who live by their cruel, self-serving laws. He will strike. He will take what is needed. He will prove that some men have the right, the strength, the moral superiority to transgress for the sake of others, for the sake of a higher justice. The old pawnbroker, Alina Ivanovna, becomes not just a pest to be eradicated, but a vessel. Her death, in his tormented mind, is no longer merely a means to personal gain, but a sacrificial act, a blow struck against the very fabric of injustice that threatens to consume his beloved family. He is not a common criminal. He is an avenger, a liberator, a man who dares to step beyond the bounds of convention, propelled by a profound, if profoundly twisted, sense of duty. The path is clear now, terrifyingly so. The internal battle, though not entirely resolved, has reached a new, decisive stage. The extraordinary man theory, born in intellectual arrogance and nursed in squalor, now has a name, a face, and a hammer poised to strike. The stage is set. The curtain has just begun to rise on a tragedy of immense proportions. Chapter 2. The weight of a guilty conscience. The dawn, a sickly, yellow-gray, bled reluctantly into the stifling box of a room, doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom that clung to every dust-laden surface. Raskolnikov lay motionless on his sofa, his eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on a spider web in the corner. His head throbbed with a relentless, dull ache, and a profound nausea coiled in his gut, tasting of dread and something metallic he couldn't quite place. He was awake, undeniably, yet the world felt distant, dreamlike, as if he viewed it through a thick pane of distorted glass. His first conscious thought, or perhaps more accurately, his first instinct, was a frantic, primal urge to check his surroundings. He swung his legs off the sofa, a jolt of pain shooting through his temples, and stumbled to the door. The bolt was in place, the latch secure. He pressed his ear against the cold wood, straining to catch any sound from the landing. Silence. Only the frantic pounding of his own heart, a drumbeat of terror. The memory, a raw, festering wound, began to seep into his awareness, not as a coherent narrative, but as a series of fragmented, grotesque images: the glint of the axe, the old woman's shriek, the blood, oh God, the blood, and then, the other one, the innocent, stumbling into the nightmare. He pressed his palms to his eyes, trying to force the visions away, but they persisted, tenacious and vivid. Then a sudden, cold panic seized him. The items, the stolen things, they were still wrapped, clumsy and conspicuous, under his sofa. He lunged for them, his fingers fumbling with the cloth, his breath catching in his throat. What to do? Where to hide them? His mind, usually so sharp, so capable of intricate schemes, was now a fractured mess. He pulled up a loose brick by the stove, thrust the package beneath, then immediately recoiled. No, too obvious, anyone could find it. He paced, a caged animal, his eyes darting around the small room. A hole in the wallpaper near the window. He tore at it, revealing a small cavity in the wall, a hollow space perfect for he crammed the package in, pushing until it was out of sight, then tried to smooth the wallpaper back down. Still, he could see it, a subtle bulge, a telltale imperfection. He tore it out again, pulling the package forth, his heart hammering against his ribs. The brick, it had to be the brick. With trembling hands, he returned the cursed bundle to its first hiding place, covering it with a scrap of paper, then replacing the brick. He stood over it, panting, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. Safe for now. But the anxiety gnawed at him, a relentless rodent, a sudden noise. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate. They stopped outside his door. A faint scratching sound, as if someone was trying the handle. Raskolnikov froze, every muscle tensed, his blood running cold. This was it, they knew. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for the inevitable crash of the door, the stern voices, the handcuffs. His stomach lurched, he was going to vomit. Then, a woman's voice, Nastasia's, sharp and insistent. "Rodion Romanovich, are you in there? The porter wants a word," and the porter's gruff reply. "A summons from the police office, I tell you! Important business." Raskolnikov sagged against the wall, a wave of dizzying relief washing over him, instantly followed by a fresh surge of terror. A summons, the police. It couldn't be a coincidence. They were playing with him, drawing him out. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. He had to face it. He had to pretend. He unbolted the door, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped the latch. Nastasia stood there, arms akimbo, her expression one of impatient concern. The porter held out a slip of paper. Raskolnikov took it, his eyes blurring over the official seal, the neat calligraphy. His name, the address of the police office. He mumbled a reply, something about being ill, needing a moment. The walk to the police office was a blur of sun-drenched streets and indifferent faces. Each step felt like a monumental effort, his legs leaden, his head swimming. He swayed, stumbling frequently, nearly collapsing at one point, saved only by a sudden rush of adrenaline. He was convinced every passerby looked at him, knew him, judged him. The weight of his guilt was a physical burden, pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. He reached the police station, a dilapidated, grimy building that seemed to mock his despair. He stumbled up the stairs, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and stale humanity. He presented his summons, his voice a hoarse whisper. The official, a stout, ruddy-faced man, barely glanced at him, waving him towards a bench. He sat, his gaze fixed on the grimy floorboards, trying to make sense of the chaotic murmurs around him. His mind, however, kept returning to the murder, the axe, the blood. Was this the moment? Would they bring him in now? He felt faint, the room spinning around him. Suddenly, a voice, loud and clear, cut through the general din. "And it's a terrible business, this murder of the old pawnbroker Alyona Ivanovna. And her sister Lizaveta, too, right there, struck down, poor soul!" Raskolnikov's blood froze. He gripped the edge of the bench, knuckles white. The words, like a surgeon's knife, pierced through the fog of his delirium, tearing open the wound in his soul. They were talking about ***, his crime, details. He could hear them describing the scene, speculating about the perpetrator. His breath caught in his throat, and a cold sweat broke out all over his body. The room began to spin violently. A buzzing filled his ears. He felt a sudden, desperate urge to confess, to scream it out, to fall to his knees and beg for absolution. But a more powerful, primal instinct for self-preservation held him captive. He swayed, gripping the bench tighter. A wave of nausea, more intense than any before, overwhelmed him. He felt himself falling, losing consciousness. He knew he was drawing attention, knew he was incriminating himself, but he couldn't stop it. He heard a concerned voice, felt a hand on his shoulder. He fought against the darkness, forcing his eyes open. "Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov," the clerk's voice, startlingly loud. "Your business here about the debt to your landlady, Miss Zarnitsin." A trivial matter, really, settled now. A debt, a trivial debt. All this terror, all this agony for a paltry sum of money owed to his landlady. Raskolnikov stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the monumental weight of his internal torment with the mundane reality of the summons. It was so absurd, so grotesquely ironic, that a hysterical laugh threatened to escape him, quickly turning into a strangled cough. He managed to stammer his thanks, grabbed his hat, and stumbled out of the office, down the stairs, and into the dazzling sunlight. The street felt alien, the people distant, like characters in a play. He walked aimlessly at first, then with a growing urgency. He had to get rid of the evidence. The thought gnawed at him, relentless. He walked towards the Neva, the broad river glistening under the afternoon sun. The thought of simply throwing the package into the murky depths, letting it sink and disappear forever, was almost unbearable in its simplicity. He imagined the release, the sudden lightness. He could be free. He reached the embankment, the cold wind whipping at his threadbare clothes. He felt in his pocket, clutching the package, his fingers trembling. He raised his arm, ready to cast it away. But then, a strange, sudden revulsion seized him, a fierce, almost violent surge of life. No, not yet, not like this. He couldn't just throw it away, couldn't just relinquish his connection to the asterisk at asterisk. A morbid fascination, perhaps, or a sudden, inexplicable desire to live, to hold on to his desperate, wretched existence. He lowered his arm, turning abruptly from the river. He wandered for hours, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The city, usually a source of inspiration and distraction, now felt like a suffocating maze. He felt utterly alone, completely severed from humanity, a pariah in his own skin. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray, he found himself back in his wretched room. He sank onto the sofa, utterly spent, his body aching, his mind a feverish blur. He was ill, he knew it, deeply, profoundly ill. The weight of his guilty conscience, no longer a mere metaphor, was a physical presence, crushing him, suffocating him. He lay there, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, awaiting the inevitable delirium that he felt creeping in at the edges of his consciousness, a grim companion for the long, terror-filled night ahead. The silence of the room was now a roar, filled with the echoes of his crime, and there was no escape. Chapter 3, The Detective and the Mind Game. The city, a labyrinth of yellowed stone and shadowed alleys, seemed to hold its breath as our protagonist, Rodion Raskolnikov, ascended the worn staircase to the third floor. Each step was a defiance, each breath a struggle against the suffocating air of suspicion that clung to him like a shroud. He was summoned, you see, to the quarters of one Porfiry Petrovich, the examining magistrate, ostensibly to discuss some trifle concerning the pawned trinkets from the old hag's apartment. But Raskolnikov knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the true purpose of this visit was far more sinister, a prelude to a psychological duel that would either break him or cement his desperate resolve. He knocked. The door, heavy with untold secrets, swung open to reveal a man of peculiar aspect. Porfiry Petrovich plump, with a round, almost cherubic face, yet whose small, quick eyes betrayed an unsettling sharpness. He greeted Raskolnikov with an exaggerated cordiality, a wide, almost theatrical smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Rodion Romanovich, what a pleasure, what a genuine, unexpected pleasure," Porfiry exclaimed, his voice a smooth, oiled instrument. He gestured towards a deep, upholstered armchair. "Do sit, my dear fellow, make yourself comfortable. My apologies for the summons, purely bureaucratic, you understand." Raskolnikov, his face pale and drawn, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity, managed a curt nod. He sank into the armchair, every muscle taut, every nerve screaming. The room was disorderly, overflowing with books and papers, a faint smell of tobacco lingering in the air. It was designed, perhaps, to disarm, to lull one into a false sense of security. But Raskolnikov was beyond lulling. He was a cornered animal, hyper-aware of every shift in the air, every nuance in Porfiry's gaze. "So, the matter of your pledge," Porfiry began, leaning back, his hands clasped over his ample stomach. He spoke of the watch and the ring, of forms and formalities, his words meandering like a lazy river. Raskolnikov listened, or pretended to, his mind a whirlwind of defensive strategies, his pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against his temples. He felt exposed, scrutinized, as if every pore on his skin was under the microscope of Porfiry's knowing gaze. Then, quite suddenly, the river veered. But before we delve into such tedious matters, Porfiry interjected, his eyes twinkling. "I recall, quite vividly, reading a most extraordinary article of yours, on crime, was it not? Published some 6 months ago in Periodical Review. Raskolnikov felt a jolt, a cold dread snaking through his veins. This was it. The blade was unsheathed. He fought to keep his voice steady. Yes, I did publish such an article. A student's rambling, nothing more. Nonsense. Porfiry chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. A work of profound insight, Rodion Romanovich. You propose an intriguing classification of humanity, do you not, into the ordinary and the extraordinary. He paused, his gaze fixed on Raskolnikov, that unnerving smile playing on his lips. And if memory serves, you suggest that these extraordinary individuals, these enlightened few, possess a certain right to overstep the law, to commit certain transgressions, should their grand design necessitate it, for the greater good of humanity. The air thickened, pressing down on Raskolnikov. He felt a desperate urge to explain, to intellectualize, to distance himself from the horrifying implications. I merely posited a theoretical framework, he stammered, a philosophical exercise. That certain great men Newton, Lycurgus, Muhammad have historically advanced humanity by disregarding existing moral codes. They are creators, destroyers of the old, builders of the new. Indeed, Porfiry purred, nodding slowly. And what if, by some unfortunate turn of fate, one of these extraordinary individuals, a visionary, a genius, perhaps were to find themselves in a situation where they deemed it necessary to eliminate a particularly useless, perhaps even harmful, old woman, simply to clear the path for their own noble endeavors? Would that be, in your theory, permissible? The question hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed straight at Raskolnikov's heart. He felt his face flush, then drain of color. He wanted to shout, to deny, to escape. But Porfiry's eyes, those unnervingly intelligent eyes, held him captive. Such a hypothetical is extreme. Raskolnikov managed, his voice hoarse. My theory is not an advocacy for bloodshed, but an analysis of historical patterns of progress. Of course, Porfiry said, waving a dismissive hand, yet his smile deepened, becoming almost predatory. But tell me, Rodion Romanovich, how would one distinguish these extraordinary individuals from the common rabble? And more importantly, how would they know, themselves, that they are indeed extraordinary enough to take such liberties? Perhaps by some inner conviction, a profound sense of their own rightness. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though the room was silent save for their breathing. And what if this extraordinary man, in the very act of his transgression, were to find himself mistaken? What if the act itself were to shatter his self-proclaimed extraordinary nature, leaving him nothing but a trembling ordinary murderer, tormented by the very guilt he believed himself above? Raskolnikov's breath hitched. He knew, with an absolute, terrifying certainty, that Porfiry knew. He saw it in the glint of his eyes, heard it in the inflection of his voice, felt it in the suffocating weight of the unspoken accusation. The detective hadn't accused, not directly, but he had painted a picture so vivid, so precise, that it mirrored the torment in Raskolnikov's own soul. Are you suggesting something, Porfiry Petrovich? Raskolnikov finally croaked, his voice barely audible, his hands clenching into fists. Porfiry merely smiled, a broad, knowing smile that chilled Raskolnikov to his very core. He leaned back again, his eyes twinkling. Me suggesting? Heavens no, Rodion Romanovich. Purely a philosophical discussion, nothing more. A most fascinating one, I might add. But, he added, his voice dropping slightly, one cannot help but wonder, can one, about the practical implications of such grand ideas. The silence that followed was deafening, a chasm of unspoken words and chilling understanding. Raskolnikov felt sweat prickle on his brow, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. He was cornered, exposed, his elaborate theoretical fortress crumbling around him under the relentless, jovial assault of Porfiry's intellect. He yearned to run, to scream, to confess anything to escape the unbearable pressure of that knowing gaze. Finally, with a Herculean effort, Raskolnikov pushed himself to his feet. I must go, he stammered, clutching at the first excuse that came to mind. I am not well. This discussion, it has tired me. Porfiry rose, his smile unwavering. Of course. Forgive me, Rodion Romanovich, for exhausting your keen mind. But do come again, won't you? There is so much more to discuss. And do remember, he added, his voice dropping to a low, intimate tone as Raskolnikov reached the door, the mind is a curious thing. It reveals its secrets in the most unexpected ways. Raskolnikov stumbled out, down the stairs, into the bustling street, feeling as though he had walked through fire and emerged not cleansed, but utterly flayed. He had played a game of chess with a master, and every move he thought he made had been anticipated, every defense turned into a new attack. The city still held its breath, but now, Raskolnikov knew, it was waiting for him. Porfiry Petrovich had planted the seed of doubt, not in the detective's mind, but in the criminal's, and the harvest, he dimly understood, would be his undoing. Chapter 4. Sonya in the path to redemption. The pale light of a St. Petersburg afternoon, filtered through the grimy window panes, laid a thin, dusty blanket over Sonya Marmiladova's tiny room. A single candle, though unlit, sat ready on the chest, a quiet sentinel against the encroaching gloom that seemed to perpetually hover outside these walls. The room itself was a study in profound poverty, yet meticulously kept abed with a patched but clean sheet, a plain wooden table, and a couple of rickety chairs. No extravagance, no ornament, save perhaps for a small icon in the corner, before which a lampada burned faintly. Raskolnikov stood, a dark silhouette against the meager light, his presence filling the cramped space with a turbulent energy that Sonya, small and fragile in her threadbare dress, absorbed with an almost preternatural calm. He had come here, drawn by an irresistible force, not to confess, not yet, but to gauge, to prod, to test the very limits of human endurance and faith that he saw embodied in her. "So, Sonya," he began, his voice a low, raspy murmur, eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape, "your stepmother, Katerina Ivanovna, she's still raging, still crying out for justice that will never come." Sonya nodded, her gaze fixed on him, full of a gentle, unassuming understanding that both infuriated and calmed him. "She is, Radia. The children, they are hungry. She says they must beg." A faint tremor ran through her, quickly suppressed. "And you, Sonya?" he pressed, stepping closer, his shadow falling over her. "What of you? Where do you find the strength for such sacrifice? To live in such depravity, yet remain untainted?" The word hung in the air, a challenge, almost an insult. "Tell me, what will happen when Katerina Ivanovna dies? When the children are truly alone? When you lose your only purpose?" Sonya's eyes, large and sorrowful, met his without flinching. "God will provide, Radia. He will not abandon us." Her voice was soft, clear, imbued with an unshakable conviction that seemed foreign, almost alien to his tormented soul. Raskolnikov scoffed, a dry, bitter sound. "God? And what if there is no God, Sonya? What if all is permitted? What if salvation is a lie, and suffering merely pointless agony?" He was not merely questioning, he was tearing at the foundations of her world, and perhaps of his own. "Do you truly believe in Lazarus, Sonya, in the raising of the dead?" A spark ignited in her eyes, not of anger, but of a fierce, hopeful light. "Yes, Radia, I do." She retrieved a small, worn New Testament from the chest. "Would you like me to read it to you?" He hesitated, a strange curiosity, a desperate need for something, anything, seizing him. "Read it," he commanded, almost hoarsely. "Read me about Lazarus." Sonya found the passage with practiced ease, her fingers tracing the words on the yellowed page. Her voice, at first quiet, grew in strength and clarity as she read. "Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Jesus wept. Take ye away the stone. Lazarus, come forth." Her voice trembled, filled with a profound emotion, and as she reached the part where Lazarus rises, her gaze lifted to Raskolnikov, eyes shining with a holy fire. Raskolnikov stood transfixed, listening to every word, his face pale, his breath catching in his throat. The ancient miracle, whispered in that squalid room, seemed to pierce through the layers of his cynicism, stirring something long dormant within him. He saw in Sonya's faith not a weakness, but an immense, terrifying power. The reading finished, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the distant sounds of the street. Raskolnikov began to pace, his hands clenching and unclenching. He felt a terrible pressure building within him, the words on his tongue struggling to break free. He had to tell her. He had to. "Sonya," he choked out, stopping abruptly before her, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. I asked you once, what would you do if you found out your friend, your dear friend, had committed a great crime?" Sonya looked up, her face draining of color as she sensed the shift in his demeanor, the unbearable weight in his voice. "Radia, what are you saying?" He let out a short, harsh laugh, devoid of mirth. "I am saying, Sonya, that the old pawnbroker woman and her sister Lizaveta, it was I. It was I who killed them, with an axe, and robbed them." The words, once spoken, seemed to rip through the fragile air of the room. Sonya gasped, a small, choked sound as if struck by a physical blow. Her eyes widened, filled with a horror so profound it seemed to shatter her very being. She swayed, her hand flying to her mouth, stifling a scream. A moment later, she crumpled into the nearest chair, her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. Raskolnikov watched her, a morbid fascination mixed with a perverse relief. He had expected outrage, condemnation, perhaps even fear. But this despair, this raw, boundless sorrow, was something he hadn't anticipated. Slowly, agonizingly, Sonya lifted her head. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes, though swollen, held an immense, shattering pity. She rose, walked towards him, and before he could react, she fell to her knees, wrapped her arms around his waist, and clung to him, weeping uncontrollably. "What have you done to yourself, Radia? What have you done?" she sobbed, her voice a broken whisper against his coat. "There is no one in the whole world now unhappier than you." He stood rigid, her touch both a torment and a strange solace. He had confessed, and the world had not ended, but rather his own personal hell had intensified, for now he had dragged her into it. "I killed a louse, Sonya," he muttered, trying to justify, trying to cling to his theory of the extraordinary man. "A useless, harmful louse. It was not a man I killed, but a principle." Sonya pulled back, still on her knees, her eyes fixed on his, piercing through his flimsy defenses. "You killed a human being, Radia, a sister in Christ, and you have killed yourself. You have turned your back on God, on humanity." She stood, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. "But you can still redeem yourself. You must suffer, Radia. You must accept your suffering." She clutched his hands, her small, cold fingers gripping his with surprising strength. "Go at once, this minute, stand at the crossroads, bow down, kiss the earth you have defiled, and say aloud to the whole world, 'I am a murderer.' And then God will send you life again. Go to the police, confess everything, and accept your punishment." He stared at her, bewildered. "Suffer? Why should I suffer? For what? Because of some foolish theory I put to the test. Because I dared to step beyond the bounds of ordinary men." Sonya shook her head, her face shining with an almost ethereal light. "Not for them, Radia. For yourself. For the terrible suffering you have brought upon your own soul. Take up your cross, Radia, and bear it." She reached for the small cypress cross that hung around her neck, a simple, worn piece of wood, and unfastened it. "Take this, Radia. Put it on. Let it be your guide, your hope." He looked at the cross, then at her, her face a beacon of unwavering faith amidst the wreckage of his soul. He had come to her in his despair, a dead man walking, and she, a harlot in the eyes of the world, was offering him resurrection. The path she pointed to was terrifying, a public humiliation he still recoiled from. But for the first time in months, he felt a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of hope, a fragile seed planted in the barren wasteland of his guilt. He took the cross from her hand, its worn wood surprisingly warm against his cold palm. The silence in the room stretched, thick with the enormity of his crime and the immeasurable depth of her compassion. The path to redemption, arduous and uncertain, had just begun. Chapter 5. The supporting cast as moral mirrors. Petersburg, a city of pale skies and suffocating heat, where the very air, thick with the exhalations of a million desperate souls, seemed to press down upon Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. He lay, half delirious, in his stifling garret, the walls grim, peeling witnesses closing in around him. His mind, a battlefield of grand theories and gnawing self-doubt, had been a tumultuous storm for weeks, but on this particular morning, a new, sharper blade pierced the haze, a letter from his mother. One might imagine a son's heart swelling with warmth at the sight of his dear mother's hand, but for Raskolnikov, this missive was a poisoned chalice. It spoke of love, yes, but also of a stark, brutal reality that his lofty intellect often sought to ignore. It painted a vivid, agonizing portrait of his sister Dunya, beautiful, intelligent Dunya, whose spirit he knew to be as fiery as his own, now caught in the cruel gears of circumstance. She was to marry Pyotr Petrovich Luzhin. Luzhin. The name itself grated on Raskolnikov's sensibilities. His mother's description, innocently penned, nonetheless sketched a man perfectly repulsive, self-important, vain, possessed of a small, mean soul. He was a man who, as his mother gently hinted, sought a wife who would be his benefactress, yet one accustomed to submission. A woman, in short, who would forever be indebted to him for raising her from poverty. And here, then, was the first moral mirror. Dunya, his beloved sister, was selling herself. Not for love, not for passion, but for him. For Raskolnikov, to pull him from the abyss of his poverty-stricken student life, to perhaps fund his elusive genius. Her sacrifice, born of profound love and a terrifying pragmatism, reflected back on Raskolnikov not as gratitude, but as a searing indictment of his own inaction. He, the great thinker, the extraordinary man in waiting, was a burden, a drain. His sister was about to step into a gilded cage, all for his sake. The injustice, the humiliation, the sheer, crushing weight of her imminent sacrifice choked him, fueling a burning resentment against the world that demanded such cruelty. It was a catalyst, refining his abstract theories into a terrifyingly concrete imperative. He fled the garret, the letter clutched in a feverish hand, seeking not solace but distraction in the labyrinthine streets. He wandered aimlessly until, drawn by some invisible thread of fate, he found himself in a tavern, a grimy sanctuary for the dispossessed. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale beer and cheap tobacco, but what truly assaulted his senses was the conversation drifting from a nearby table. Two men, a student and an officer, were engaged in a lively, dispassionate discussion. They spoke of Alina Ivanovna, the old pawnbroker, the very woman who had for weeks been a persistent, nagging whisper in Raskolnikov's fevered mind. He leaned closer, a chill despite the oppressive heat running down his spine. The student, with a surprising zeal, expounded upon her uselessness, her wickedness. She was a louse, a vicious, stupid, ailing old woman who hoarded wealth and caused suffering. Her death, he argued, would be a blessing, her money put to good use for hundreds, thousands of good deeds. And there, delivered with the casual brutality of everyday conversation, was the second moral mirror. These were ordinary men, articulating, even justifying, the very thoughts that had festered in his own mind for so long. They spoke of the pawnbroker's life as worthless, her existence as a blight, her elimination as a positive, even necessary act for the greater good. Their words, raw and unvarnished, were a grotesque echo of his own complex, theoretically robust justifications. It wasn't just who thought this. Others, seemingly sane and moral, could also conceive of such a just atrocity. The convergence of these two events, Dunya's sacrifice, a visceral testament to the world's crushing unfairness, and the tavern conversation, a chilling, external validation of his own dark ideology, hit Raskolnikov with the force of a physical blow. His head swam. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to present him with an undeniable truth. Action was required. Dunya's plight demanded a rescuer. The pawnbroker, an embodiment of the world's parasites, demanded eradication. And he, Rodion Romanovich, the extraordinary man, was destined to be both avenger and savior. The abstract philosophical experiment he had toyed with, the audacious theory of the chosen few who stood above conventional morality, solidified into an inescapable command. He was no longer merely contemplating, he was chosen. The path was laid before him, dark and terrible, yet illuminated by a perverse sense of destiny. The very idea of the murder, which had often filled him with revulsion, now felt like an imperative, a grim duty. He stumbled out of the tavern, the noise and the light of the setting sun assaulting him. He walked, not knowing where, but now with a dreadful clarity. The die was cast. The world, through these unwitting moral mirrors, had shown him his reflection, not as a sinner, but as an instrument of a higher, terrible justice. And within him, a terrifying certainty bloomed: he would do it. He must do it. The game, for good or ill, had begun. Chapter 6. The epilogue, a new story begins. The clanging of the prison gates had long ceased to echo in the vast, desolate stretches of Siberia. 8 years. That was the sentence, pronounced with a detached finality that Raskolnikov had, in his peculiar way, almost welcomed. It was a tangible end to the abstract torment, a physical burden to replace the unbearable weight on his soul. He had journeyed eastward, chained amongst murderers and thieves, a man who believed himself above them, yet one whose hands were stained by blood, perhaps more profoundly than theirs. And with him always was Sonya, her small, timid figure, enduring the harsh realities of katorga life, a quiet flame of unwavering devotion in the frozen wilderness. She settled in the nearby town, working tirelessly, living solely for those moments when she could see him, exchange a few words, a glance, a silent promise. The other prisoners, hardened men, saw in her a divine compassion, a sister, a mother, and they revered her, shielding her with an unspoken respect that even the most brutal among them could not deny. Raskolnikov, however, remained stubbornly apart. His intellectual pride, though battered, clung to him like a shroud. He despised himself, not for the murder he still, in his deepest recesses, believed his theory had a certain grim logic, but for his weakness, for succumbing, for confessing. He saw himself as a failure, a man who couldn't endure the consequences of his extraordinary idea. He considered his fellow convicts a crude, unthinking mass, their crimes born of instinct, his of a philosophical conviction. They, in turn, sensed his aloofness, his intellectual scorn, and repaid it with indifference, sometimes even hostility. He felt no kinship, no common humanity. He was an outsider, even amongst outcasts. Sonya's visits were a quiet torture for him. He would often turn away, speak harshly, resent her patient suffering on his behalf. He couldn't understand her selfless devotion. It was beyond his rational, calculating mind. It infuriated him, this pure, unmerited love. Yet, he knew, Deep down, he couldn't imagine life without her. Her presence was a faint, almost imperceptible warmth against the Siberian chill of his spirit. He would see her among the other prisoners, her face alight with a gentle sympathy, her words bringing solace, and a strange, unbidden pang would strike him. Why them, and not me? Months bled into years. His health, both physical and mental, deteriorated. He fell ill, confined to the prison hospital. It was there, in the grip of a feverish delirium, that the dream came, a terrifying vision of a plague, sweeping across the world, infecting men with a horrifying new madness. Each man believed his truth to be the only truth, that his convictions were beyond reproach, and that all others were beneath him, their ideas worthy only of extermination. The entire world was consumed by this intellectual arrogance, this inability to see beyond one's own self-proclaimed genius, leading to universal strife, famine, and chaos. Only a chosen few, pure and uncorrupted, survived. He awoke from the dream in a cold sweat, shaken to his core. The grotesque mirror it held up to his own past theories, his own conviction of being an extraordinary man whose truth justified any means, terrified him. It was a vivid, sickening revelation of the monstrosity inherent in his own intellectual pride. The days that followed were marked by a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. His usual surly defiance began to fray. He found himself thinking of Sonia more often, her quiet strength, her boundless compassion. He saw her face not just in his waking hours, but in his mind's eye. One day, word reached him that Sonia too had fallen ill, not gravely, but enough to confine her to her lodgings. A strange, unfamiliar dread gripped his heart. He felt a sudden, sharp emptiness, a terror at the thought of her absence, of that constant, gentle warmth extinguished. He realized, with a shock that reverberated through his entire being, that he had never seen her truly, had never acknowledged the immense, saving power of her love. His heart, so long hardened by pride and intellectual theory, cracked open. He walked to the hospital where Sonia was recovering. The sun was warm, spring was tentatively returning to the desolate landscape. He saw her sitting by the window, her face pale but her eyes, as always, holding that boundless, tender light. She smiled, a radiant, familiar smile, and a wave of something he hadn't felt in years, perhaps never, surged through him. He sat beside her, not knowing what to say, his throat tight, his mind a whirlwind of emotion. She offered him her hand, her small, thin fingers resting gently in his. He held it, and in that touch, a lifetime of stubborn resistance, of intellectual arrogance, of self-imposed isolation, crumbled. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and the dam broke. He fell to his knees, burying his face in her lap, and wept. He wept for his crime, for his lost years, for his senseless pride, for the suffering he had inflicted, and for the incredible, undeserved love that had followed him to the ends of the earth. Sonia did not speak. She only reached out, her hand tenderly stroking his hair. In her eyes there were tears too, tears of profound relief, of shared sorrow, and of an overwhelming, quiet joy. At that moment he understood everything. He understood that he loved her truly, deeply, selflessly. He understood that his life was not his own to theorize about and destroy, but a sacred gift, bound to others, sustained by compassion. A new story began for them then, amidst the harshness of Siberia. 7 years of penal servitude remained, but they would be different years. They would be years of regeneration, of learning to live, to feel, to love. He had found not just love, but redemption. He had shed the old Raskolnikov, the murderer and the philosopher, and in his place a new man, humbled and hopeful, was stirring to life. The future, though uncertain, was no longer a void but a path. A path they would walk together, hand in hand, towards a dawn he had never dared to imagine. It was the beginning of his true life, born from the ashes of his intellectual pride, watered by tears, and illuminated by the boundless light of Sonia's love. Ah, my friends, gather close, and let us speak of mirrors. Not the silvered glass that shows but a fleeting image, but the profound, often terrifying mirror of the soul, polished by suffering, clouded by delusion, yet capable of reflecting truth if only we dare to look. We stand at the precipice of understanding, much like a certain young man once did in the suffocating heat of St. Petersburg, his mind a labyrinth of theories and despair. This is not a journey for the faint of heart, this journey into oneself. It is a descent, a confrontation, and perhaps a resurrection. Consider it a week-long sojourn into the very fabric of your being, guided not by easy answers, but by the relentless, often brutal questions that Dostoevsky himself posed to humanity. Hacks Day 1, the incubation of thought, the seed of justification's pause, my friend. Recall the quietest corner of your mind, where a thought, perhaps audacious, perhaps venomous, first took root. Was it born of indignation, of perceived injustice, or a chilling conviction of your own unique stature, a belief that certain rules, certain moral boundaries, might bend or even break, for you asterisk? For our young man, Raskolnikov, it began with a theory, an intellectual edifice built upon the suffering of others, justifying a terrible liberty. On this first day, reflect, where do your convictions truly come from? Are they forged in empathy, or in the isolated chambers of your own reason, disconnected from the pulse of shared humanity? Unearth that initial seed, trace its roots, however uncomfortable that excavation may be. Do not judge it yet, simply observe its form, its color, its potential. Day 2, the echo of action, the tremor of consequence now. If that thought, however nascent, were to bloom into action, what tremor would it send through the world? Raskolnikov's deed, born of intellectual arrogance, unleashed a cascade of psychological torment, not just upon himself, but upon every soul he touched. It wasn't just the act, it was the weight of it, the pervasive sense of wrongness that permeated his very being, turning the sunlight into a tormentor and human voices into accusatory whispers. Today, contemplate the reverberations of your choices, great or small. Have you ever underestimated the ripple effect of a word spoken in haste, a decision made in anger, a truth withheld? Understand that every action casts a shadow, and you, the actor, must live within that shadow. Feel its texture, its coolness, its reach. Day 3, the mirror of others, the web of interconnection. We are not islands, though Raskolnikov, in his feverish isolation, desperately wished to be one. He pushed away the genuine warmth of Razumikhin, the unwavering love of his family, the silent, profound compassion of Sonya. Yet it was through their reflections, their suffering, their resilience, their unconditional regard that cracks began to appear in his hardened shell. Today, turn your gaze outward. How do you appear in the eyes of those who genuinely care for you? Do you see kindness, or a masked plea for understanding? Do you recognize your own humanity in their shared struggles? This is not about seeking external validation, but about recognizing the sacred, intricate web of human connection. For it is often in the face of another, particularly one who sees you without judgment, that we begin to see ourselves more clearly, more truthfully. Day 4. The internal tribunal, the prosecutor and the defender. Raskolnikov's mind was a perpetual courtroom, where he played both judge and accused, prosecutor and defense attorney, all within the confines of his own skull. He argued vehemently for his exceptionalism, his right to transcend morality, even as a deeper, more primal part of him recoiled in horror. This day is for listening to the cacophony within. What are the arguments you deploy to justify your flaws, your omissions, your small cruelties? What are the voices that whisper of your potential, your goodness, your capacity for grace? Do they ever speak to each other, these internal adversaries? Allow them to contend freely. Do not silence any voice, however unsettling, for true self-reflection demands an honest hearing of all parts of the self, even those we wished to banish. Day 5, the abyss of meaning, the burden of freedom. When Raskolnikov committed his deed, he believed he was asserting a radical freedom, transcending the common herd. Instead, he found himself utterly enslaved, not by external chains, but by an internal void, a terrifying absence of meaning. His carefully constructed philosophy crumbled, leaving him with naught but despair. Today, inquire into the wellspring of your purpose. What gives your life meaning beyond immediate gratification or fleeting success? Is it a devotion to others, a pursuit of beauty, a quiet faith? Or is there an abyss, a lingering sense of emptiness that you often try to fill with distractions? Confront this void, if it exists. For it is only by acknowledging its presence that one can begin to seek out true, enduring sources of meaning, those anchors in the storm of existence. Day 6. The unburdening, the courage of vulnerability, the journey towards redemption, for Raskolnikov, began with a profound, painful confession. Not to a formal authority, but to the gentle, suffering heart of Sonya. It was an act of terrible vulnerability, shedding the armor of pride and intellectual arrogance. It was not a magical absolution, but the necessary first step on a long, arduous path. On this penultimate day, consider the burdens you carry in silence. Are there words left unsaid, apologies unoffered, truths unacknowledged even to yourself? What would it take for you to speak them, even if only to your own reflection, or to one trusted soul? The courage lies not in speaking perfect words, but in the willingness to shed the pretense, to stand exposed in your imperfection. It is in this raw vulnerability that healing truly begins. Shext Day 7. The glimmer of new dawn, the path of atonement, after the confession, after the suffering, after the long, cold journey to Siberia. A faint, trembling hope began to stir within Raskolnikov. It was not a sudden burst of joy, but a quiet, profound realization that love and suffering could lead to renewal. This final day is not about finding a definitive answer, but about embracing the process of atonement. It is the recognition that self-reflection is not a destination, but a lifelong pilgrimage. What small, deliberate steps can you take, today and in the days to come, to align your actions with the deeper truths you have uncovered this week? How can you cultivate compassion, not just for others, but for the struggling, imperfect self you have confronted? Embrace the long road, the continuous effort. For it is in the patient, persistent turning towards the light, however dim it may initially appear, that true transformation is found. Go forth, my friend, the mirror awaits. And remember, it is in the profound depths of human suffering and the unwavering gaze upon one's own soul that the truest narratives of redemption are written. Come closer, my friends, and let us draw near to the flickering flame of Dostoevsky's genius. For within the harrowing corridors of crime and punishment, he has etched not merely a tale of transgression and consequence, but three profound, immutable truths concerning the very essence of human error and its costly reckoning. These truths, like ancient prophecies whispered from the depths of the soul, echo across time, revealing the intricate dance between guilt, suffering, and the elusive grace of redemption. The first, and perhaps most startling, truth that Dostoevsky compels us to confront is this: the true, unbearable punishment for a crime is not the judgment of courts or the confinement of prisons, but the internal crucible of the perpetrator's own mind. Before any judge can gavel, before any chains can clink, the murderer, the transgressor, is already forging their own invisible shackles. Witness Raskolnikov, fevered and frantic, not after his capture, but before it, and indeed, immediately after the brutal act. The moment the axe falls, he becomes a stranger to himself, an alien in his own skin. His carefully constructed intellectual edifice of the extraordinary man crumbles, not under external pressure, but under the weight of a raw, primal terror and revulsion. His mind, once a fortress of logical superiority, transforms into a labyrinth of paranoia, suspicion, and tormenting hallucinations. Every knock on the door, every casual glance, every fleeting sound becomes an accusation. Sleep offers no solace, food no sustenance. He is utterly alone, not because society has shunned him, but because his own conscience has erected an insurmountable barrier between himself and the rest of humanity. This internal exile, this self-imposed psychological torture, is far more exquisite, more relentlessly grinding than any Siberian hard labor could ever be. It is a ceaseless, gnawing anguish that precedes and overshadows all external sentencing, proving that even if the world were blind to his deed, the perpetrator carries his own judgment hall within, an inferno fueled by guilt, fear, and the profound disillusionment with one's own moral bankruptcy. This leads us naturally to the second truth, a devastating counterpoint to Raskolnikov's lofty theory's crime, especially one predicated on cold logic and a perceived right to transcend moral laws, inevitably isolates the perpetrator, severing the vital cords of human connection and rendering their very existence meaningless. Raskolnikov, in his intellectual arrogance, believed he could commit a beneficial crime, stepping over a moral corpse for the greater good, much like a Napoleon. He saw himself as an individual apart, above the herd. Yet, the moment he sheds blood, he becomes an outcast, not just legally, but spiritually and emotionally. His crime isn't merely an act against the old pawnbroker and her innocent sister, it is an act of violence against the interconnected web of humanity itself. His ability to love, to trust, to communicate genuinely evaporates. He cannot confess to his mother, cannot confide in his sister, cannot truly connect with his friends. Even when attempts are made, his overwhelming secret, his bloody nightmare, stands as an impenetrable wall. He attempts to forge new theories, new justifications, but each effort only deepens his abyss of loneliness. His intellect, once his pride, becomes a tool for self-deception and further alienation. The tragedy here is not just the loss of life, but the loss of Raskolnikov's own humanity, his capacity for empathy and communion. He sought to prove himself extraordinary, to rise above the common man, but in doing so, he plunged himself beneath the very level of human interaction, into a void where meaning ceases to exist, demonstrating that a life devoid of genuine connection of shared human experience, is no life at all, irrespective of its intellectual pretensions. And yet, Dostoevsky, ever the hopeful realist, offers a path, however arduous, out of this desolation. This brings us to the third, most redemptive truth. True repentance and spiritual renewal are forged not through intellectual reasoning or abstract theories, but through suffering, humility, and the courageous acceptance of one's guilt, often guided by the unwavering compassion of another. Raskolnikov's journey is a slow, agonizing descent into the recognition of his error, a process that is accelerated and ultimately made possible by the unwavering, suffering love of Sonia Marmeladova. She does not preach, does not condemn, she simply is. She embodies a profound, unshakable faith and compassion that contrasts sharply with his nihilistic despair. She shows him that true strength lies not in the arrogant assertion of one's will, but in humility, confession, and the willingness to bear one's cross. It is through his public confession, his acceptance of imprisonment in Siberia, and his eventual embracing of Sonia's faith, that the first tremors of genuine renewal begin. His suffering in the prison camp, though physically harsh, pales in comparison to his previous internal torment. And in this shared suffering, in this stripping away of his ego and intellectual pride, he finds a new beginning, a rediscovery of love, of God, and of his own dormant humanity. The punishment of Siberia becomes not just a penalty for his crime, but a crucible, a necessary purification, allowing him to shed the old, broken self and embrace the painful, beautiful process of rebirth. It is in the stark, unadorned landscape of his forced exile, holding Sonia's hand, that he finally begins to truly live, proving that the most profound transformation often arises from the deepest valleys of despair, illuminated by the light of unselfish love and the courage to face one's truth. These three truths, woven into the very fabric of crime and punishment, transcend the boundaries of a simple crime story. They are Dostoevsky's enduring gift to us, a profound meditation on the human condition, a stark warning against the hubris of intellect, divorced from morality, and an eternal testament to the redemptive power of suffering, humility, and the boundless compassion that binds us all. Welcome back, my dear reader, from the labyrinthine streets of St. Petersburg, from the suffocating heat of Raskolnikov's tiny garret, and from the chilling echoes of an axe-striking bone. You have journeyed through the mind of a murderer, not a common criminal, but an intellectual, a philosopher, a man consumed by a terrifying idea. You've witnessed the crime, lived through the feverish torment, tasted the bitter dust of his spiritual Siberia. Now, the final chapter unfurls, not on the page, but in the court of your own conscience. We stand at the precipice of judgment. Raskolnikov, for all his grand theories, for all his intellectual brilliance, for all the societal ills he decried, committed a heinous act. 2 lives extinguished: the miserly pawnbroker, a parasite perhaps, but a human nonetheless, and her innocent sister, Lizaveta, a kind soul caught in the brutal crossfire of a misguided ideology. The facts are clear, the blood undeniable. But Dostoevsky, the master craftsman of the human soul, never offers simple answers. He invites us into the crucible of moral ambiguity, where motives intertwine with madness, where poverty breeds despair, and where the most heinous acts can spring from a distorted yearning for justice, or perhaps a terrifying ambition to transcend the very laws that bind ordinary men. Remember Raskolnikov's theory: the extraordinary man, permitted, nay, obligated to step over certain moral boundaries for the greater good, to pave the way for a new, better world. He saw himself as a Napoleon, a Moses destined to sweep away the old order. Did he succeed? Or did he merely prove the crushing weight of a conscience, the inescapable truth that some lines, once crossed, leave an indelible stain on the soul? You watched him unravel. The fever, the paranoia, the agonizing isolation. Was his true punishment the axe falling, or the psychological inferno that raged within him long before Siberia? The haunting dreams, the compulsive confessions, the maddening dance with Porfiry Petrovich, these were the exquisite tortures of a spirit at war with itself. He sought freedom through transgression, but found himself enslaved by guilt. Then came Sonia, the pure-hearted prostitute, the embodiment of Christian suffering and unconditional love. She, who also lived outside the bounds of societal respectability, yet held firm to an unwavering faith, offered him not condemnation, but compassion. She didn't excuse his crime, but she saw the suffering man beneath the monster. Her offering of the Cypress cross, her quiet pilgrimage to his prison, her unwavering presence, these were the instruments of his reluctant, agonizing, yet ultimately redemptive journey. So, here we are, facing the crucible. What's your verdict? Is Raskolnikov simply a monster, a criminal deserving of eternal damnation, a cautionary tale against intellectual arrogance and nihilistic ambition? Do you condemn him unequivocally, finding no solace, no shred of understanding for the torments that drove him? Or do you, like Sonya, find a flicker of humanity beneath the layers of pride and depravity? Do you acknowledge the systemic injustices that festered in his world, the intellectual currents that warped his thinking, the sheer desperation of his circumstances? Does his profound suffering, his eventual, albeit painful, acceptance of atonement, temper your judgment? Think not just of the legal verdict but the moral one. Is it possible to condemn the act, yet pity the perpetrator? Can a man who commits murder, but who also endures such psychological hell and ultimately seeks redemption, be seen as something more complex than pure evil? This isn't an idle academic exercise. Dostoevsky compels us to look inward. We may never wield an axe, but we all wrestle with the temptation of self-justification, the allure of our own extraordinary perspectives, the subtle ways we rationalize our desires or resentments. We all confront moral choices, big and small, that test the boundaries of our own ethical framework. The call to action is not to march on the streets or to sign a petition. It is a call to introspection, to examine your own capacity for judgment and mercy, to ask yourself what justice truly entails: simple retribution, or a path towards understanding and spiritual regeneration. As you close the book, the characters fade, but the questions remain. Raskolnikov's struggle becomes our own. His verdict, in the end, is less about him alone, and more about the intricate, often terrifying, and ultimately hopeful landscape of the human soul. What will you carry from his story? What truth about humanity, about crime, punishment, and the boundless possibility of redemption has he illuminated for you? The court of your conscience awaits. Your verdict, my dear reader, is the true culmination of this timeless journey.